Debenhams, the people we're going to speak to Kate Hardcastle, retail analyst at Insight with Passion. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
And John Ryan, store editor at Retail Week, also MD of New Stores and analyst and consultant service for retailers. Both of those guests right on the money. What about the money? What's happened?
Well, what has happened, it has not been a good morning for Debenhams with their latest results. They've said previously that their profits wouldn't be as good as they thought, but pretty big figures, a fall of 85% in their profits, £13.5 million. If you think of is the profit they made in that half a year, if you think the amount of stores that are around Debenhams, the amount of people working in Debenhams, to make that much money is clearly not sustainable for Debenhams. Alongside that, they've said they're going through a bit of a turnaround. They said they're going to start to reduce that relationship they have to nothing with Jeff Banks, John Rocher, those brands that are core in, well, I certainly, every time you go in the menswear department at Debenhams, you know, that it's over the years, you would very much associate those with Debenhams. It shows the kind of changes they're having to make, opening new stores around the country, closing some, changing what they do with stores. So there's a lot of stuff going on at the minute. But is this a one-off? Is this the beast from the east having an effect, or is this actually something that's more ongoing for Debenhams?
Yeah, Kate, is this part of the whole pattern on the high street and the struggle for retail, or can we look at the bad weather and other factors?
Well, I think we've got to leave the bad weather at one side. We've got a brand here that's got huge challenges. We have Debenhams that's been going for over 200 years, traditional department store, priding itself on service, was innovating even until quite recently with things like Designers at Debenhams, which was bringing designers to the masses. And other brands still follow suit with that. H&M have been very successful with new brand partners like Jimmy Choo, for instance. However, they never replenished those designers, really. They stayed the same designers and therefore devalued that so that it became commonplace for it to be sold at a lower price. They've taken people off the shop floor, which means customer service has been lacking, and that's a huge important factor for their traditional customer base, not reinvented themselves, and they've been in sale, the Blue Cross sale, so long now that I think the consumer's forgotten what it's even like to buy from them at full price.
John, what do you make of it?
I think that quite agree with Kate. They've got a lot to do. I would say that if you were to take a trip up to Stevenage, you'd see in Debenhams perhaps in a new light. They opened a store there back end of last year on a budget, and it looks miles different from the average Debenhams. The thing about designers at Debenhams, John Rocher and Jeff Banks, is the old guard, and there's a bit of a shrug of the shoulders, frankly. No disrespect to both gentlemen. But if you're going to have designers at Debenhams, it does rather carry with it the notion that they're not true designer collections. They are just names that have been sewn into labels or whatever. The other thing is you look at the rest of their estate away from Stevenage, and they are going to have to run really fast to take the lessons they've learned at Stevenage and apply them elsewhere. If they can do that, then maybe there's a chance. The mid-market's under massive pressure. You can look at them, you can look at House of Fraser and a couple of others, and things are not particularly rosy. So, yeah, they've got fairly severe structural problems, but they are addressing some of them.
Not rosy. I mean, Kate, is this enough, what they're saying this morning about the part of the changes in fashion, their store structure changes, or are we going to have to see more drastic decisions from Debenhams?
I put the exact challenge to Sir Ian Cheshire, their chairman, last October when they announced their new plans. They talked about repurposing retail space with beauty bars and gyms. Every single retail property owner on the high street is trying to do the same. Everyone's trying to fill space that we don't need anymore because we're buying less stuff from stores and more stuff online and trying to do something quickly with it,
so
because there's rent and rates.
Wait, if you were in charge of Debenhams?
If I was in charge of Debenhams, I would not have removed that many people from the shop floor. Those customers want to be serviced. The very reason they're crossing the threshold is to be served by you. And if you go into most stores, the two new concept stores aside, let's deal with 150 plus. They are lacking in service. They're cleanliness issues. They've got stock issues. And most of the time, it looks like a jumble sale. I am sorry, that is not a mid-market retailer behaving and acting as they should do,
like
and serving their customer. Yeah, they're not being respectful. It's just sale upon sale, racks that are not tended and cared for, and actually that customer wants pride in their shopping. They want to go and feel special. That might be an important wedding outfit for them. In the main, of course, we can't tar all of their service staff with one brush, but if you are making a retail worker fulfill so many different roles. They're not going to be able to deliver on the eye-to-eye, personable contact that they needed to offer as a point of difference. Everyone tried to do the same thing, make the retail businesses lean and therefore take out the very quality that they could have had as a point of difference to online.
John, if Jeff Banks and the John Rocher brands aren't doing the job, where are men buying their clothes at the minute?
That's a really good question. Men buy fewer clothes than women, full stop. And, you could look at Marks and Spencer, you could look at House of Fraser, you could look at Selfridges. And yes, we'll all go in and buy stuff, but we won't buy them in perhaps the quantity that these guys want us to in order to make their books balance. Menswear, there's been a sort of absolute revolution in terms of small independent menswear shops where you can go in and buy yourself a fancy pair of socks and such like. That's kind of not what the big mid-market operators are about, and I think Debs is as much under pressure as anybody else with that.
And this store that John mentioned in Stevenage, Kate, just looking at, it's got 4 food outlets in there. One of them's a Nando's, and apparently, Debenhams saying this morning, that's done better than they expected. I mean, is that what we're going to see? Just more of that space being filled up? I know the one in Manchester has a huge cafe in the window as you walk past it on Market Street. Are they just going to be taken up by other food outlets, and Debenhams won't be the store that we used to think it was?
It's called social retail, and the idea is that because we don't need to go shopping anymore, that you're encouraged to go shopping because you'll go and meet some friends or take the family out, and then you might buy a bit, and then you might go and have, a beauty treatment. The idea is that you've got all of those things you can't do online necessarily, encouraging each other to get footfall and traffic. And of course it works to an extent, but as I said, every retail property owner has got the same idea, and it's going to be survival of the fittest. So if you've only got 2 concept stores out of 160 plus, you've got big challenges, because people aren't seeing you as the future in just those 2 stores. They're looking at the rest of them going, what does this brand stand for? And the moment, all it stands for is selling at a discount.
One text coming through I agree with exactly what you're saying there. Main problem with Debenhams, lack of customer service. I just can't face queuing for 10 minutes every time I want to buy something. I've walked away several times after waiting too long.
I've seen it with my own eyes, and it's really upsetting. I've put this challenge to the boardrooms. Too many UK retail boardrooms are not accepting that the only opportunity for the high street is to do the pendulum swing against what online offers, and they just do not accept that.
It's a strange thing. Being in Debenhams the other day, there were very few people on the floor for the household appliances and all that stuff, and yet they had a concession there. And they had plenty of good service in the concession.
It's probably maybe that they've got concession staff. Sometimes some of the concessions actually have their own staff there.
Yeah,
Can I
that's
cut in for 1 second? 30% of their sales, just over, in the Stevenage store have come from food, which is remarkably high. And they've got Nando's, Patisserie Valerie, Costa. And yes, the only question you've got to answer as far as shoppers are concerned is give me a reason to come into your shops. And if it means that you've got to put more food in there, well, so be it. I frankly think if you have a big, long cafe in the window of the store in Manchester, under the one, at least it looks busy and loved. If you have empty racks and empty spaces and people not attending to them, then you've got a real problem.
Is that a short-term fix, though, John, or is that something that can actually see Debenhams grow from strength to strength with that strategy?
I don't think it's from strength to strength, but I think it's a way forward. I think hospitality generally within stores is seen as the way forward for just the reasons that Kate says. There's too much space. So what are you going to do with it? You either close a few stores, which is being talked about in the case of Debenhams, or you try and reconfigure and think, well, what can I actually do that will use up this space? And it is a major problem.
Okay, just finally, is anybody doing this right? Any individual retailer doing this social retailing right at the minute?
Well, I mean, you only have to look at Selfridges, don't you? And it's completely at other ends of the spectrum. But you go in there, you spend a lot of time in there because you go and look at the stuff, you go and have yourself a drink, maybe a glass of champagne, you go and eat something. There's any number of restaurants in the Oxford Street one. That's what it's about. Really.
And that's lovely, John, if you've got a Selfridges. But is there anybody other than Selfridges, Kate, that, in the other towns other than the 5 or whatever there are around the country that have them.
Interestingly, I think a lot of the secondary shopping centres are having to do this. So where you used to have one very premium shopping centre, the ones that have perhaps some of the secondary brands having to turn things around. So I'm seeing lovely things happen, actually. There's one in Wakefield that runs a cuppa club that is working with over 50s who feel lonely in the environment, becoming a community player. There's just initiatives that are out there that are economical. They just mean giving people the time of day. And I miss that about retail. That's a retail I was brought up in, and I wish it came back.
Kate Hardcastle, John Ryan, thank you very much for that. It's fascinating, the outlook. Debenhams sums up a lot of what is going on in the high street, doesn't it? When we talk about the individual stores, the ones that are doing well, Primark probably, opposite Debenhams in many town centres doing well, we've heard this week. That's what they're having to battle with, and they need to get people in store and buy from them, and that's not happened over the last half a year.
One of the real things that gets us coming to work in the morning and makes this such a pleasure is hearing from people who know what they talk about.
It is.
Know what they're talking about.
Thank goodness they exist.
It's 8:13.